So welcome to SIETAR Southeast Asia, where it's late afternoon, early evening here in Singapore. We've also got some of our team in Kuala Lumpur and Hong Kong. And it's really good to see everybody. So do feel free. I'm sure you're all familiar with Zoom these days. Put in the chat where you're joining from, and whether it's tea time or breakfast time, or whether it's evening for you, wherever you are. We'll just wait a few minutes until some more people who are joining come in. And then we'll look forward to a nice interactive session here with our speaker, Kyle, who's going to be introducing himself later, and we'll be using some case studies, but we're looking for people to take part. It's going to be quite interactive, and I know we have a lot of expertise here as well, so hoping to get some good ideas and some good sharing from you all in groups. So as I say, if you want to at this point, do feel free to put your cameras on, but I know that some people are not so comfortable doing that, so that's also fine. So we welcome you here in Southeast Asia, where it is a public holiday. Happy Vesak Day. I know it's a public holiday here in Singapore. It's one of the important dates in the Buddhist calendar, and is a holiday so widely across this part of the region. So not that it makes much difference, since most of us are working from home anyway, so it's hard to tell whether it's a holiday or not, but we are grateful to our speaker Kyle for joining us on a public holiday when he could have been, I don't know, doing many other things. Kyle, what could you do on a public holiday?
I've sent the kids down to the pool, so they're hopefully you'll hear when they come back, I'm sure.
Okay, good. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for taking the time, and we really are very grateful to you for spending this late afternoon with us and sharing your experience. And just for those of you who are, I see we've still got a few more people coming in, so we'll just wait a minute or so till people settle. I can see quite a number of people who are probably already familiar with SIETAR Southeast Asia and SIETAR, but just before we start, as I say, welcome. SIETAR is the Society for Intercultural Education, Training and Research, and we're part of an international network of SIETARs, of people who are interested and involved in working across cultures and dealing with people in different cultures. We're a fairly new SIETAR. We build on the activities of what was SIETAR Singapore a few years ago, but also there are SIETAR organizations around the world that have these kind of events. And one of the great opportunities at the moment, as we were saying, the challenges and opportunities of working in COVID times is that we're all working virtually. And so we are able to welcome participants coming in from all around the world, which is really nice, and we really look forward to that interaction. We also have speakers able to sometimes join us from different parts of the world, and we are able to join other SIETARs in different parts of the world. So all of that is good stuff. And today we're particularly looking at an area which I know is of interest to many of you here, is how you can use case studies to improve business and working with clients to really who are really in the trenches with your clients. So what is culture when it actually comes to working with other people and using those case studies? So we've got some great examples. So as I mentioned, what SIETAR is, I should mention that we will be recording. I think you've already had to agree to be recorded, as that's we hope to use this on our website so that people who aren't able to attend the session can look at it afterwards. But if you have any problem with that, you can switch off your camera, or let us know if there's any reason that you don't want to be included in any photos or recordings. This is what we're covering today. Shortly, I'm going to introduce our team and also those who are moderating the session, and then we'll have the presentation and discussion, and we'll do, as I say, quite a lot of interactive work where you'll be involved as well. And then we'll also mention some of the dates for events coming up afterwards. So background of SIETAR and our wonderful team here, most of whom are here today. So Artie and Greg and Judith and Srivan, Marie-Therese, who all help organize and have been involved with this session. And some of the core values and our website and so on there. We're very much a community of practice. We span several disciplines. We have people who are involved in consulting and training, in working as individuals. We have people working in companies as well. And we really welcome all participants in all of this. So as I say, I won't take up much more of your time, but looking forward to getting started on this session. Today later on, today we are going to have Greg and Judith, who are on our team, and they will introduce our speaker, Kyle, and I will hand over to him. So I'm going to stop talking for now and hand over to Greg and Judith. Thank you very much for organizing this session.
Thank you, Joyce. And hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Kyle Hegarty. So Kyle is going to make us dive into case studies to see how we can use them to improve business for us and our clients. Kyle is based in Singapore. He helps organizations grow globally by helping leaders and teams find new ways to communicate and lead across our shrinking planet. Kyle's also developed sales and marketing training programs to help clients to increase business across regions, and also global communication program to help strengthen teams, build trust, and prepare the next generation leaders for tomorrow's threats and opportunities. And Kyle just published his first book called The Accidental Business Nomad, a survival guide for working across a shrinking planet. His book won the 2021 Axiom Business Book Award. We are very happy to welcome Kyle today.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Joyce. Wonderful. Well, thank you. And thank you everybody for joining, especially for those of you joining on a holiday. As was mentioned multiple times, we'll make this interactive and let people just explore a couple of ideas. As we were putting this program together, we asked, here's another book about cross-cultural business. And as you can hear from my accent, I'm from North America. So who needs another North American guy writing a book about Asia? But I did. But I think everybody in this room already has a very large grasp of the cross-cultural obstacles that we're all going after here. The big idea that I had for this book was that organizations have gone global, but people have not. And I wrote this thing and it got published or it got locked down in 2019. I was suggesting that everybody or more people than ever are working globally, even if they don't have passports or can't travel. And I'm smiling because the thing, we locked down the content January of 2020. And then I wasn't allowed to touch anything until it got published in July of 2020. And the timing in some ways couldn't have been worse, because had we had a month or two or three extra, we could have made some pretty significant messaging changes without changing any of the content at all to make it more about working virtually or working in a pandemic. So the content still holds true. I'm still happy about how it came out, but I do, from a marketing standpoint, I wish that we were able to have adjusted the content to be more about remote work and working globally from that standpoint. But you work with what you've got. In fact, I've had a quick poll I wanted to ask people right off the bat, just as we get started here. And I'm going to do two things. I'm going to open up my chat just to make sure if anybody has comments, questions along the way. I want to keep this as informal and just loose and kind of fun as possible. So feel free to jump in with any types of conversations or chat. Let me open up my chat group. Good. First poll question. This is a little bit random, but for anybody involved in books in the past or thinking about books, one of the big trends that's happening is audiobooks. Audiobooks are a fun way to get to new audiences, but there's some new challenges that pop up. And one of the challenges that I found when I wrote this book, it's a very story-driven book. So there's a lot of characters in it, and those characters are from different parts of the world. Here's my first question for you. Should an audiobook narrator use accents when representing or when reading his book, his or her book, with characters from different regions of the world? For those of you who have listened to recent audiobooks, I think that there's more of this happening where the narrators are using accents for different characters. And I'm just doing this out of pure curiosity. I want to hear from this group. What do you think? Should audiobook narrators use accents when reading books with characters from different regions of the world? Do you think it's appropriate, or do you think that there's potential for issues or for cultural insensitivity or any of the rabbit hole problems that could happen? I'll keep this open for another 15 seconds or so. We've got a lot of people voting already. Almost everybody here. If anybody else want to vote? Okay, we've got 10 seconds. All right, let's end the poll. And here's the answer. This, let me know if you can see this. Can everybody see this? For Joyce or Greg, you can see the results. All right, large percentage of people say, yeah, go for it, versus no, this could be considered offensive. Let me tell you my story later today about what happened, because as I'd said, my book has a bunch of characters from all different parts of the world, and it opens up some interesting questions as to how they get represented in an audiobook. I think I learned something from this accidentally. I like the word accidental because so many times these things happen accidentally. Okay, good stuff. So that was that's interesting feedback for me there. Yes, it depends on how good are their accents, says Joyce. I think you're absolutely right. We'll talk about this at the end. I thought we'd just kind of dangle this one, and I was curious to hear what the room thought. So that's kind of a fun starting point. As I'd said, this book argues that organizations have gone global, people have not. I believe this is why we are all in this group, to help continue to figure this stuff out. I've been here in Southeast Asia for 15 years, and I'm basically helping Western companies or foreign companies figure out, land, and expand their sales and marketing efforts across the region. The book is a series of stories about that. As I had said, it's very narrative driven with stories. I found a couple of individual Westerners, but I also profile some people from different parts of Southeast Asia and what they go through. And one of the common threads was that when you get a foreign manager who comes in, to a foreign part of the world, new team, they make a lot of noise. They make a mess of things. They often don't listen. They flap around, kind of cause all sorts of chaos. And in many situations, in 1 or 2 years, they fly away. And this is happening virtually as well. And I had heard this term years ago. I'm trying to bring it back, but we call these types of foreign managers seagulls. And the idea is that seagulls are these big, goofy birds that fly in from out of nowhere. They land, they tear the place up, they crap all over the place, and then they just fly and disappear and leave. And I walk through a couple of what I hope are entertaining stories of, we'll call them seagull managers, and some of the common mistakes that get made from teams. Now, I think that in this group, you all know this stuff. And so what we wanted to do today was say, well, what do we do to advance this from a from a case study standpoint. Because one of the things that I found when the book came out was that people were going, you know what we're doing is we're taking one of these chapters, we're having our executive team or our junior team read one of these, and then we're having a deep dive discussion. What would you do if this person was, if you were in charge? What would you do? What advice would you give to this character next time? And that has been what has, I think, been the best part of the book launch in the last year. The case studies, meaning that we get these groups together. It's kind of like an advanced book club to a degree, but we focus in on one chapter or one character, say, what's the strengths and weaknesses? What did this person get right? What did they not get right? What have they learned from it? Again, what would we advise this person? And that's why I thought it would be helpful to talk to this group today about case studies. Because for me in the last year, it's, I don't want to say revolutionized, but it's massively changed how I go to market and how I work with companies. We're putting a lot more focus on case studies and going from there. So I'll just kind of see if anybody has any questions so far in terms of where we're going with this. Because what I want to do today is actually give an example of a specific case study, break people into groups and let them work through it to discuss. We're all experts, hopefully, on these topics. So let's see how people would handle a case study. And then let's also think about our own businesses. Can we learn from this, and can we enhance case studies that we're using, or can we come up with new case studies that we can bring to our existing clients? Does anybody have any, just as I think we've got a small enough group to open up to Q&A or just sort of comments. If anybody have any experience, successes with case studies so far? Anybody agree or disagree with my theory of case studies and their importance?
Hi, this is Catherine.
Hi, Catherine.
Actually, I was wondering, I was really interested because from my experience, what I did so far is I train obviously in companies and at the same time students. So now
Yes.
For students, I use a lot of case studies, especially because they come from different backgrounds, different company sizes, whatever. But with the companies so far, I experienced that most of the time, and maybe it was because I had weak case studies, but they preferred, and that's what I try to figure out in all the pre-meeting talks I have, what are their actual issues? Because I think they relate far more to their own problems than when I come up with case studies. But so how is your experience in this regard?
So it's a really good point. So let me rephrase it just to make sure I've got your question the right way, which is, and I agree. So the universities, it's the grad schools where I'm doing a ton of this stuff, lecturing with those, and those are going, and those across the board. It's easier because it's kind of, white space. When you go into a specific company, it's got to be more relevant. So your question is, well, you get some pushback by people saying, this case study isn't relevant to my situation, I'm not interested. Is that right?
Yeah, this would, or even just, if we deal with their actual problems, they relate far more and maybe even are more motivated or so.
I'm laughing, I'm not laughing, I'm smiling, because that brings me to our second poll, which it's almost, Catherine, thank you so much. We have never spoken before, but this is literally the question I have is, what kind of case study is more effective to use when working with a client-specific case study, a third-party case study, or both are equally effective? So let's answer your question in the form of a poll, or at least get it started that way to see what people have to say. You set it up perfectly.
What?
I'll give another 10 seconds here for people to answer.
But I have to admit, while talking about it or thinking about it, especially when it comes down to your question, it really is, if there are topics which are difficult for them to address, it might be much easier to have a third
That's what I want to talk
study.
about. I think I 100% agree.
Okay.
And let's, so I'm going to have a counterintuitive potentially discussion here today, but here's what the group here today says. A client-specific case study. And we can probably qualify that more. Nobody said a third-party case study, and then a large percentage said both can be equally effective. Yeah, look, this is one of those leading questions, or the question probably deserves more context, but you can't go off and do with an executive team a case study that's not really relevant to them, right? I have found in the trainings that I'm doing in the last few years, I'm getting more pushback with third-party stories by people saying, well, this isn't me, this isn't relevant to me, or this isn't this. I might give an example from a large company that happened in Malaysia, and I'll get pushback in Singapore saying, well, that's Malaysia, that's not Singapore, that's not relevant to me. I personally find that frustrating and a little bit short-sighted, but I get it. You've got to make sure that the content that you are providing is relevant, is adding value, and most importantly, that the people that you're working with understand where you're going with it. So I think that what I found in companies, the benefits to these third party or to case studies is that it's experiential if you can get their buy-in. Right? If they're willing to go for it and just roll up their sleeves and have a go at it, it's experiential. And to your point here, this is the big one. This is a safe way to dig into sensitive topics. This is like I'm not saying this is our problem. I'm just saying this is a problem. How would you advise this person? Where you're kind of reading between the lines and you know that if you, what I'm doing with a lot of Western companies. There's one chapter in the book that follows this woman. She's a senior executive American who comes over to Singapore and sets up an office. And I believe it's so relevant to every Western company, that first or starting group of people that come in and face all of these obstacles, these steep learning curves. I just follow her around for a year and watch what she goes through, the frustrations, the learnings. And everybody, people all kind of smile and they read it because we've all been through it. But it's a safer way to have people talk about her name. I think I named her Claire. Claire the Bulldog was the chapter, the chapter. I said, well, let's talk about Claire. Let's talk about Claire's problems. And half hour later, we're talking about this guy's problem who's right in front of me, but we're still talking about Claire because he's still not willing to talk about himself. So it's this kind of fun, well, it's a little bit safer way to have difficult conversations. Behavioral rather than theoretical. If you all, for anybody who uses behavioral or personality profiling tests, I think case studies are a really cool way to apply some of the results. Let's test how people act or behave in specific scenarios. So again, I think, Catherine, to get to your question or point, as long as those scenarios are within a realistic realm, I think it makes a lot of sense, right? Drives creative thinking. Here's the other thing about the safety. You create more safety, you enable people to start spouting out ideas that they might not have been willing to say if we were talking about their specific company. So I guess my long-winded answer to your question is, I think if you can create a parallel situation that is similar enough to your client, but far away enough so that they're not talking about their colleagues, they're not talking about anybody specifically, it avoids some of that politics and some of the head trash, right? The preconceived notions. It enables people to go to another place and come up with creative ideas. And so I think that, I don't know, anybody else have any comments or thoughts on this? Has anybody had any success with case studies in groups that are outside of academic or students? We're going to break into groups in a second because I'm going to make you do some work for me here. I've got a client. This is what this example isn't exactly from the book. This is a real-time situation. So here's what we're going to do in a big way today for the rest of this session. I want to oh, my slides are in viewing mode. Thank you. Doesn't look like that for me, but okay. Let me just see if I can fix that. Apologies for that. Now you tell me. Better?
Better, thank you.
All right. The big thing, what I want to do today is to have people break out into small groups and to look at a specific scenario. This scenario is a real one. For those of you most in Southeast Asia or anybody who works with branch offices where headquarters might be located somewhere else, this will not come as a surprise. This is, I think, probably one of the more common scenarios in variations. But what's happened with this situation, this is a UK insurance company. They've done very well. They expanded into Southeast Asia about 10 years ago and did fine, did well, no major issues. They had one guy running the show. And now let me be able to move my thing. Oh, there we go. Managing director for APAC. He was the guy who came over 10 years ago. He set the whole thing up and he recently retired. And the UK team started poking around and they did not like what this guy has left behind. What they have found is that there is a massive culture of top-down leadership, decision-making. He basically ran the show. He did everything. He created a strong hierarchy where all decisions came to him. He kind of had his own little kingdom. And again, for those of you who work with small to even medium-sized businesses, this is not an uncommon situation. Top-down leadership style, little autonomy. So people were not able to make their own decisions. Everything went up to him. The communication between, in specifically Southeast Asia, APAC, and the UK was poor. There are global accounts, but really things were done in silos. The teams didn't know each other very well. When they did have to collaborate together, it didn't go very well. Both sides felt the other side was incompetent, lazy, poor communicators. The more that they tried to bring people together, the worse things got. There was no succession plan. So all of a sudden, this well-to-do company finds themselves sitting here going, okay, what are we going to do here? How are we going to clean this up? The headquarters in the UK, they took over. So they start managing APAC remotely. This started, by the way, in 2019. Relationships between the two offices sour further because, as everybody knows, when you've got kind of foreign managers coming in from on the other side of the world, you get a bit of a seagull problem because there's not a lot of local understanding. But this is starting to affect global accounts. Global clients are getting upset because the service is going down because of the infighting, the politics, the silos are getting stronger. This company needs help. I want to have you break into small teams. And here are 3 questions I would like to ask. What are the short and long-term strategies, or what short and long-term strategies should be considered as they decide how to rebuild their APAC structure? Question 1. By the way, what we're going to do, just so you know, we'll randomly put people into breakout groups and you'll be randomly assigned one of these questions. So the first question is, again, what could be some short and long-term strategies that should be considered as they decide how to rebuild their APAC structure? What type of individual should take the managing director role for APAC? Create a job description. Who should they hire? And why? What's that going to look like? What's that person's profile potentially look like if they're going to hire? Are they going to look internally, externally, both? What are those behavior traits that they're looking for and why? What advice do you give that person in charge of this whole transition? She's a real person. She's based here in Singapore. What advice do you give this person in charge of this transition? Again, I love this case study because it's so real. For any of you who are working with companies that have that kind of global situation, this shouldn't come across as anything too wild and crazy or unheard of. I'm trying to turn on my chat. I can't see it. This is what we're going to do. So Greg, I think you're going to be in charge of dividing the group up and deciding who's going to do what. So we'll have probably based on the numbers, I assume we're going to do 3 teams, Greg, is that right?
Right, so teams A, B, C, and I put the 3 questions with A, B, C in the chat. So each group knows which question they need to.
Brilliant. Have you labeled
answer.
each of the,
Yeah.
so each group will be labeled?
Yeah, A, B, C.
Wonderful. I'm trying to see if I'm trying to get my chat up. Are there any questions for this assignment here? And forgive me, I can't see the chat tool, so.
There's no question in the chat. Okay.
No question. We're going to give each of the groups 20 minutes to discuss. This is a fun way to network. You can meet some new people here, get to know people, and discuss. What I would like you to do is, first step, introduce yourselves, have a quick chat, nominate somebody to take notes and to take the lead from your group. Who is going to be in charge here? Because then we would like that person to give a summary of what did the group discuss, what ideas, what answers came from this when we come back into the main group, excuse me. And so that would be that. And then you can work on your question. We'll give the total of 20 minutes. We'll give a countdown via chat every 5 minutes so that you know where you're at. Have a little bit of fun with this. Come up with some ideas. Do not be afraid to come up with different ideas. If you want to, I don't know, if you've seen other examples of this, give us some stories, help out. This is a great way just to kind of flex our cross-cultural consulting muscles and advisory muscles here and see what we can do. So why don't you, Greg, break people across into groups and we'll have a little bit of fun and come back in 20 minutes. They're all back, coming back. All right, I was able to hop through each of the 3 breakout rooms. I was hearing some very good conversation, good networking. This specific case study clearly lacked detail, and that was partially deliberate because it gives you a little bit more flex. But and I think I asked variations of this in different rooms. This is not an uncommon problem. When I think about the consulting opportunity or the opportunity for intercultural, consulting roles, this is exhibit A of massive problems that cost companies millions of dollars. That I'm not saying it's an easy solution, but I think that we all in this kind of industry have a pretty immediate sense as to where some of the troubled problems are and what can be done about it. But then the next question is, roll up our sleeves. What do we actually do about it? What advice do we actually give? And I'd be very curious just to hear how this conversations went. So with that, of course, I've lost my slides. Okay. Group 1, I think you all figured it out on your own, which was accidental, but you're all very smart. Group 1 was team A. And that was the question, what short and long-term strategy should be considered as this company decides how to rebuild their APAC structure? Anybody from Team A want to share with us what you came up with, conversation that you had?
Okay, I will summarize our discussion. First of all, we all agreed that this, information what we have with the background is not really, enough, sufficient. So
Okay.
as a consultant, we all think it's, irresponsible to say, short and long term strategies to them.
Yep.
So we have
Fair
actually
enough.
so we are all professionals. So we have actually more questions to you before tackling these questions and answering. So what we would really ask the companies, so it would be
Yep.
the company's mission, value, mission and vision and values, and so those statements, and also we would interview the MD or those people who key persons in a company. That's also one thing. And also who is this MD actually? Where is this person coming from? It's a background, age.
Which MD?
The newly coming in
Yeah. Yeah.
MD. Is this person? Where is this person from? Nationality and age, or is it he or she or that?
Yeah.
And also that previous experience, if this person has been working for this company and then became this position, or he or she is from another company and got this position. And also who the team members are, who he has to manage. And yeah, I think, and also we need more the stories, the company stories. So we want to read here more the stories.
So okay, so at a kind of a high level though, you were saying that the first you just need more information before you can give any type of framework to think about directions.
Yep. So those are the things I said were the questions we would, as a consultant, we would ask the companies before starting anything.
Okay. Any other thoughts from any of the other groups
or
anybody else?
Anything adding? Anything I forgot?
Well, yeah, it's basically just adding to what you already said, that obviously it makes a huge difference what the company's strategy is. Yeah. And even to learn, because we in this case study, you mentioned what they didn't like, what they see. But obviously it depends on your own company values, because I mean, if I have a top-down leadership and it's working well for the company, for the leaders as well as the team members, you might not even want to change anything. Yeah,
it's an interesting one, right? Where and I think that everyone would agree, or I've seen this is such a common situation. And apologies for cutting you off, but just to give some more insight into this situation.
Yeah.
The APAC, they were doing okay. They weren't crushing it, but they were doing pretty well, and in their own little cocoon. Mm-hmm. And the problem, though, was when an outside change happened, and there were two outside changes that happened in this situation. One, the regional MD left, and then two, the pandemic struck. So people couldn't travel back and forth anymore. And so the strength that was the autonomous unit in Southeast Asia actually became a weakness during a pandemic, which is kind of interesting. And I think this is not, again, like I find this specific example so pertinent because so many companies walked into this at the beginning of 2020, where some of the advantages of their localization strategy ended up becoming a little bit more of a disadvantage when all of a sudden the flights stopped and they couldn't communicate the way they were used to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's because, again, sorry, and I'll just hear, as you mentioned before, and I'll mention that in our group as well, that when you mentioned the retiring or actually leaving the company, my first immediate question was, well, isn't it the company's responsibility to as well to look into their succession planning. So do they have any issues in the headquarters? Yeah, which isn't even concerning APEC only, it's what's going on in the headquarters. Yeah. So there's so many different layers actually.
There sure are. Yeah, they got caught on their back foot. They you know, they weren't expecting. I think people look. I mean, in good times, companies get complacent. And we've all seen this before, where companies they know that there's some gaps. They've got this guy in the other side of the world. We don't know what the heck he's doing, but the numbers are okay, so we're just going to let that go. Right. We're going to worry about other things, and you know, sometimes those things come back to haunt you. So yeah, yeah, it's a good point. Okay, any other final thoughts on question A? I guess what I'm hearing is that you would do, the first step would be a thorough amount of research, interviews, understanding what the company needs to really be focused on before you can make any type of advice, even at a high level, as to what they need to be thinking about. Okay. Group 2 or question B, what type of individual should take the managing director role for APAC? And but before I ask that question, or before you answer it, I was very deliberate about this, because that hiring moment, I think, is so critical. And I see so many companies from all parts of the world make hiring decisions that don't necessarily take the global or local factor into account the right way. That's at least what I've, and I'll give more insight into that in a minute, but I'll hand it over to team 2 or team B.
Yeah, so I'm the presenter of team B. Let me just share my notes which I've written down. Let me just give a second. Yep. So can you see my word? Yeah, this is.
I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could take over like that. But well done.
Well, I guess we have been doing, you know, online trainings a lot recently. So we've got some skills learned the last month. All right. We left out the hard skills because we thought, you know, what an MD should have, right, which is appropriate for the company. So we just left that out. So what we talked about was just on the soft skills. As you can see here, we started talking about, you know, managing multicultural teams. So this person, or he or she or whatever, should have some international experiences. So we talk about, you know, the exposure to the different cultures, which should be really one of the top of the soft skills, which is really needed. And, you know, this person should have had some, you know, proof of success, you know, successful leading maybe international teams before. And then we talk about skills and qualifications, like, for example, a language proficiency, especially if this person is in Asia. I think an advantage of an Asian language would, you know, would be a very good thing for this person. You know, English is definitely one of it, that, but an additional like Chinese, Malay, or whatever, it's definitely an added advantage. And then you talk about intercultural communication skill. Well, this is a bit general, but then we move on by saying that, okay, this person, because he's a leader or she's a leader, this person should need a strong leadership skills. And then we do ask, like, what is strong leadership skill? And then we move on, like, you know, it should be the person that be able to manage a diverse teams, the person that who have this Western good, you know, understanding of the Western and Asians mindsets, with an open mindset in that sense. Person who is willing to learn, because being a manager, a leader, it doesn't stop you from learning as well. So being curious and high tolerance of ambiguity in, of course, in the much changing and challenging context in Asia, being able to face this kind of challenging situations. Well, so this is what we probably, what we understood under that umbrella of strong leadership. Mm-hmm. and also good communication skill, intercultural communication skills. And then, well, towards the end, we have some laughs about, you've got to be a good singer because you have to drink, you have to sing in karaoke, seem to be in good health.
Good health, you gotta be able to.
But of course, we added, especially in APAC, this the attitude, right, towards relationships. The person have to be more persons-oriented, relationship-oriented, because we all know that Asians put a lot of emphasis on that. So being able to communicate well and to liaise well with the people, and so this is our list of skills.
It's a good list. And sorry, my kid, I can hear my kids thumping around, so I know they're back. So I keep getting distracted. But look, I thought a lot about this as I put the book together, because one of the trends that I saw was, and let's talk about West to East, common trend in the last 20 years of globalization or Westernization or whatever we want to call it. When companies decide to bring on a leader to take over or to create or open up new markets, they often hire people with behavior traits that are dominant, outgoing, competitive, task-focused, aggressive, not necessarily in a negative way, but just like, very much straight shooter, very direct. They solve problems via confrontation. I'm thinking about this from like a behavioral profile model. You get your sort of, dominant behavior types or fiery reds or whatever we want to call in any of our frameworks out there. And I think to the list that I just saw there, the traits needed or the skills needed in many ways are the exact opposite of what I just said, which is the ability to be open-minded, to be curious, to listen to other points of view, to slow down and focus on relationships. And more often than not, and I think about this from an American point, especially because I've seen so many tech companies do this. They bring over a dominant personality type who rushes in to grab the region by its neck and just, and win at all costs kind of thing. And I'm being a little bit extreme here, but to me, this frames the culture clash, the clash that we see so often in these companies. And my favorite character in the book is Claire, this American executive who is exactly what I just described, who rushes into this situation. My big fear, quite frankly, for this company, because they're still going through this process, when I think about UK, in this case, it's a UK finance company, very traditional, very old-fashioned. All of your traits that you've listed, I don't disagree with any of them. They don't have them internally. So I guess one question would be, would you recommend that they try and find somebody internally, externally? What kind of guidance would you give the hiring people from that standpoint?
Maybe let me just add on that. I think one of the best strategy would be to get somebody, well, internally or externally, but nevertheless, I think that getting an Asian to do the job would be my choice, because I believe that being born and raised probably in that particular culture, you have you have all the nuances, you have all this deep cultural learning in you, which an external might not have. But somebody might have lived in Asia for 20 years, but I guess I still feel that it's not so quite appropriate, even though you might have that long experience there. I mean, I could say that for myself, because I've been living like in Germany for 20 years. You know, still don't feel that German in that sense, right? In times of where I have to make quick decisions, I think that we tend to fall back to our very original, you know.
You're absolutely right.
Traits.
I think it's such a good point.
Yeah.
To me, the one point I would add there is the one, so if you're going to go with a local hire, which to me would be the ideal solution, but the one trait that I would be looking for would be an experience from the local hire managing their managers back in the UK in this example, and who can communicate crystal clear to a UK audience with UK expectations, because that's often where the big challenges happen as well, if they're not used to that cross-cultural communication from that standpoint, or from that direction, right? So yeah, Molly, I think that's a really good point. Just being, comment?
Just add to that, because I think we need someone like Molly indeed, someone who's maybe Asian originally, that has spent a lot of the years in the West, so to say, and then maybe wants to go back to the East. But because I think taking a native, maybe that person may be biased within Asia as well, may not be accepted in all the different countries. So I think this is, I'm not sure the origin is so important. It's more the exposure that person has had. So either a Westerner, a long time in Asia, or vice versa, something like a combination. As you were saying, Kyle, someone who can communicate with both worlds anyway.
Yeah. And that's hopefully, that's why we're all here. Hopefully we're all getting some projects going. But Molly, send us your CV if you're interested in this role.
I don't think she wants to go back to Asia, but you never know.
I have no financial background. Sorry.
No, I think that they've already decided they're going to do this internally, for good or bad. But again, this is kind of what you're up against. Just being conscious of time, let's go to the final team just to hear what your thoughts were to question 3, which was, what advice do you give this person in charge of the transition?
Well, I've taken some, actually, we haven't decided who should speak up. So I've taken some notes. I don't know, I don't want to take over, but if you want, I can try to say what
you're in charge, Sylvia.
And you can add up information or contradict me if I'm not mistaking me. I don't, would that be okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I have taken the following notes. I haven't typed it in, so I'm sorry, I need to look down at my notebook. Well, advice that we need somebody, it's linked to the previous, what the previous group said, understand both the global headquartered culture and the UK culture, as well as the Asian culture. I mean, really have a full understanding of all those worlds. Somebody who would know Singapore as well, and Singaporean culture, but maybe more than that, maybe also you said that they have a number of subsidiaries or affiliates in Southeast Asia, so have an understanding for the different regions, maybe not only Singapore, and that would be too limited. And have, through a coach or possibly a trainer, ask them questions that make them think, questions that for which they don't have the answer. Let's imagine it's somebody from outside Asia. That could be, how could you be a good leader through the Confucius values that are dominant in Singapore, make them think a little bit, so that could be one-on-one or group training, but something very customized, so that make them think and reflect, so they can, not give them answers, but make them progress. I have taken down, also I have a cross-cultural and also team building training, putting people from both sides, from the headquarters and from Asia, because from what we've understood, that they don't communicate very much, or at least a limited number of people, and distance has aggravated the situation. So I think as soon as they can have a face-to-face meeting where they can both learn about each other, but also get to know each other on a human level. And during this training, for instance, ask them
the stereotypes they could have about the British people, the Singaporean people, or other Asian people. Of course, everything could be conducted in English, since you said everybody can speak English.
Yep.
At least at the top level people, maybe at the lower level that could be something different. So, team, I don't know if I missed anything you said that we should add.
Let me, if there's no other comments on this one, good, all good. I think let me just give you a quick bullets in terms of what's happened in this account. They did an employee engagement survey in 2019, which verified all of the challenges that I talked about, which was the internal communication was very weak. The collaboration between offices was nil to next to nothing. And so they took it upon themselves to start building L&D projects to start trying to bridge that gap, because the MD, both MDs were quite frankly guilty of just being complacent about letting both of the regions just go in their own directions, even though there was need for more cross office communication. So they started doing more projects together. They started forcing a little bit more interaction. They started working across, with time zone issues, and started to be a little bit more conscientious of that. They started mixing teams slowly. COVID hit, and all of that effort paid off massively, because what COVID did was there was another issue that nobody brought up, or they didn't even realize, was that headquarters in the UK had this sort of gravitational pull. People in Asia were afraid to bring up challenges or reach out to people in the UK, because it kind of felt like an us versus them, and that the headquarters had all the power, and it felt like a very unbalanced relationship. COVID smashed that hierarchy. Really interesting. The headquarters, all of a sudden, nobody's in a conference room anymore. It's not one person from Asia talking to 10 people in a conference room where all you see are 10 blurry faces that you can't read body language. All of a sudden, it was 10 people in a Zoom conference, all kind of on an equal plane. And because they had started doing that communication work beforehand, they were actually in the right. They had a pretty good momentum to continue that integration. So they actually used the pandemic not as an excuse, but it accelerated the interaction between the two offices, and they took advantage of it, and they started mixing teams even more. I don't know what they're going to do in terms of their hire, but I thought it was such an interesting component, the fact that they did an employee engagement survey this year. It was not inappropriate, but it was a statement that you couldn't publish. But somebody said the pandemic was the best thing that's ever happened internally to this company, because everybody just started communicating so much better. And now they're at the point where headquarters is starting to come back in the UK, and I'm doing everything I can to say, let's not go back to the way things were. We've got to think about, all of the benefits that this company created from this separation from working remotely. And let's not lose that. Let's not rebuild this gravitational force if possible. For example, stop doing video calls where there's a conference room and one or two people calling in from the other side of the world. It's unbalanced. It creates an us versus them environment. If you're going to do a conference call, it's all or none. Either all be face-to-face or all be virtual. Don't try and hybrid this kind of stuff. So we're wrestling with that and kind of figuring it out right now as we speak. I think it's a fascinating case study, and so far it's been a very big success story. But and again, to Groups 1's initial point, I didn't give you much detail. So really what I wanted you to think about was at a high level, how would you start thinking about this at a structural level? Any questions or comments on that case study, just as one example of how we can get groups to interact and kind of think about different challenges that might not be directly impactful to us, but hopefully we can learn from. Any comments, questions on this? Again, being conscious
I
of
have
time.
something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Something. It's really similar, but of course it's a bit different. But the situation that I actually is sort of I'm facing now with one of the companies here in Japan, that they have this high position person came in, and not MD or something. So the assignment sort of time is now 5 years, but the things are not going well. And any proposals he sends or to give, it's a Japanese American company, and this person is Brazilian, different mixture person. And the previous all the suggestions and proposals he sends, the Japanese side says, well, we're working, we'll think about it, we'll get back to you. And this is a typical thing. I had a case before with another company to keep saying that, and at the end, things like, well, okay, well, sorry, but it's time for you to go away now to move to the next location. So sometimes Japanese companies, the Japanese team side, try to just, gain time and not to do so much, but just telling the positive say that, well, we're thinking about it, we're trying to do something,
Yes.
but actually not doing much. I cannot say for sure that maybe they're doing something, but actually nothing happens, and then just wait for this person to move to the next location. And that has been happening often. And I myself also had the similar thing, and I really pushed through. So even to set up the training program, some of the companies who are saying, well, we'll do it, we have to do this and that, and just pushing back all the time. So maybe that's typical, it's not APAC, but maybe the Japanese culture side, but yeah.
Oh, if we probably have to do a whole separate session on Japan versus every other culture from that one. I mean, I think probably everyone in this group has their own Japan examples and stories. I'm working on one right now with a client.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this story just reminded me of that case. Right now, I'm kind of talking to this in person.
Thinking out loud. I mean, I think that the SIETAR group is so cool because it would be really interesting for people to have that community where you can put out these sort of case studies for these discussions, just to see if people are interested in helping out or giving some ideas. Even asking additional questions can be really helpful that way. So hopefully this, maybe that's an interesting direction we could go in as moving forward. Because I know as we've just gone through this one, I'm sure everybody has some specific ones in their heads. Again, conscientious of time here. So one final thing before I hand it back over to Greg and team, the audiobook situation. So I sold this idea to a traditional publisher. This went through Hachette, which is one of the larger global publishers out of the UK. They sold the audiobook rights to another company, and I never heard from them again, only to find out that they got this guy to be the narrator who is a professional audiobook narrator. He does like the Jack Reacher books. So he does like adventure kind of stories, and which I thought was cool because my book is not a traditional business book, if anybody's taken a look at it. So I thought that'd be interesting. And he apparently was good with accents. It's an American guy, but here I am talking about all these stories about Southeast Asia. This guy's I've got Singaporean characters, Filipino, Taiwanese, Australian, British, German, Americans from different parts of America. How do you do that? I never even thought about it until the book came out, the audiobook came out, and lo and behold, this guy tries to do those accents. He doesn't know the difference between Singapore. He's never been to Singapore, most likely. He doesn't know the difference between Singapore accent and Philippines accent. Basically what he did was he just did an Asian accent for all of these different characters. And I don't know. I'm still a little bit uncomfortable about it. I find I had no choice, so I had to kind of go with it. But here's my book about cultural awareness, and this audiobook comes out with this guy you know, this American guy doing Asian accents, and I'm going, oh my God. Now, I checked on Amazon. The cheapest way to get the copy of the book is the audiobook. So if you are interested in that train wreck and my potentially partially racist audiobook that's come out, that would be one easy way to get your hands on it. Again, things happen by accident, ladies and gentlemen. We just never know. With that, I will hand it back over to the SIETAR group. Thank you all so much for joining. And if you are interested in a hard copy, please email me. My email address is on this slide, I think here. There we go. If you can see that still, send me an email. I can send a hard copy for 20 Singapore dollars plus whatever shipping. If it's in Singapore, I can just do it for $2. If you're outside of Singapore, I can send you a signed copy. Otherwise, you can get these things in ebook or racist audiobook, anything you're interested in. Thank you again, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Kyle. I think that was a very nice and very interesting session. Someone just asked about the book name again. And I think it would be also helpful to put your email address in the chat.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had a screen with my shared screen again, but it looks like I didn't. There we go.
Oh, okay. So we can see it. Thank you for that. So please feel free to contact Kai directly. So I think you highlighted the point very nicely that it's sometimes much easier to use a case study in certain cases. And I think it's also very nice suggestion to have a kind of working group between the case studies. So whenever we feel stuck in certain moments with certain clients, that would make it much easier. So our work would be much easier in this way. So this is what I just wanted to add to your presentation. I don't know if anyone has still some question, please feel free to do that. You can put into the chat because Kai is still here. Otherwise, I would like to invite you for the next webinar, what we will have in June. Please look for the newsletter. You will have all the details about that. I don't know, Artie, if you want to mention something.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So thanks, Kyle. Okay. Thanks, Judith. Thanks, Kyle. That was fascinating. I am definitely going to ask you for a copy. That's separate. Okay. And in terms of the next event, that's in June 7th, a book called Global.
Wait, sorry, Artie, we can't hear you very well.
Yeah, we seem to have problems with Artie's sound.
Yeah,
so I just hear me okay.
Yeah, and your cultural or personal, building resilience. Yeah, so a couple of interesting themes. It's June 17 if you want to block your date and time. I think time is 8 or 8:30 p.m. Singapore time. Thank you. Over to Judith. Yeah.
Artie, sorry, shall I put the link, registration link in the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody wants to register, yeah, sure. It promises to be very interesting. So do join us if you can.
But you will have also the newsletters. You will have the details in that, and then you can do the registration through the newsletter as well. If you haven't signed up yet, just please do so. You can find the details on our webpage, which is SIETAR.org. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this session today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And it's really been a great afternoon. Nice to see everyone. Please do join us for our next event, or we have other events coming up in July and August as well. But if you're on our mailing list, you'll receive the newsletter. We've got some interesting sessions planned looking at different aspects of living and working in Southeast Asia. So really nice to spend the afternoon with you. Thank you again for giving up your holiday. For those of you who are in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, today being Vesak Day. So it's nice to spend it with all these intercultural colleagues, and hope to see you again soon.